Your challenge, for those of you who are joining us, is to figure out which of our three incredible presenters this session you want to join, because you can only do one, unless you have a magic way of having one ear tuned to one and another tuned to the other. This next panel discussion is going to be moderated by Jennifer Linde. Jennifer, as you heard, is a mentor to so many of us. She's a professor at Arizona State University Hugh Downs School of Human Communication and co-author of Hot Topics, Cool Heads. And as you've heard me say, she's a friend, she's a mentor, and a true inspiration to me. I encourage those of you that are attending these breakouts to participate, to ask questions, to dig deeper, share your thoughts. I'm confident that all of your presenters will learn more from you, probably more from you than you will learn from them. So we're going to go to Zoom with the same instructions as before. You can either go to your agenda or you can click on your screen, the Zoom link. Once you're in there, you'll go to the breakout rooms and you can pick the particular breakout room you wish to join. So we're going to make that switch now. Say a special prayer. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I got way ahead of myself. We're going to the panel. So now you're going to see Jennifer along with our three speakers, and I'm going to get out of here before I mess it up any further.
It's okay,
so it's
It's been a lot. Hi, folks. They're coming back. There's Tara. There's Ted. There's Richard. Welcome back. Thank you. So we have about a half an hour to invite questions, to have you expand upon your ideas, maybe think about where you make those kinds of connections with one another as you are doing these kinds of applied civility exercises, formats, ways of thinking. I did want to point out as a framing for our discussion right now, it's interesting to me how we have unintended, but really, really present, this idea of the interpersonal, right? So Richard takes us through this intrapersonal kind of experience, right? That we are thinking within our own selves. We are grounded in our own values, our behaviors. And then Tara takes us to the interpersonal, the group, the interaction, the dialogue kind of thing. And then Ted is asking us these bigger, civic, societal questions about change. So I think that you have this really interesting connection already as panelists. So I hope that we can hear a little bit more about some of that. I have some questions ready to ask each of you that I've been curious about as I've been working through your body of work, but also just listening to you today. I have a few things that I think have popped into my head as well. And I also welcome you to ask questions of one another, or maybe draw upon something that you heard in one of the presentations. And for those attendees out there, I also invite you to ask your questions and present them to these panelists. This particular panel, I think, is really interesting. We have people doing work, right? We keep saying, how do we do this? And coming from somebody who has done this kind of work for close to 20 years now, it's challenging. It's always challenging. So how do we find the spaces where we can do this kind of work? So Tara, you started us out with civil dialogue, something I'm, of course, familiar with. I wanted to pose my first question to you. As you're thinking about civility and civil dialogue, I'd like to take us back to our keynote today, to Dr. Anderson's concept of equity, right? So your grant at your university was very specific. How did you see civil dialogue accommodating those calls for equity? How can we see this as a format that might hold equity as we seek justice and equity? What happened with your work in that area?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I'd like to start with thanking you for training me 7 years ago to be able to organize these events and, cultivate civil dialogue and civility in my community now at Cal State Fullerton. I would say that equity is at the core of the project. When I first wrote the rationale, when I applied for this grant, it was all about thought diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe that allowing spaces for a variety of thinking and ideas and opinions on a controversial topic where people are obviously, you know, passionately against one another. I think that shows equity. Like there's 5 chairs of people, 5 people that believe in very different things. And I don't think there's anywhere else where you see, 5 people of very different ideas equally get the equal amount of time, equal amount of exposure to their belief and opinion. So I think it's within the method of civil dialogue facilitation itself that equity manifests.
So you're really conceptualizing it as equity of thought. So we have diversity of thought and we give opportunity for diversity of thought. Yeah, one of the things for me, Tara, also is about how one audiences civil dialogue as well, right? So you have your 5 participants, but you have, in your case, 125 people in a room. They are also watching and hearing and listening to and eventually having their own opinions heard, but they're really absorbing that diversity of thought, which it could be, kind of an interesting way of thinking about our goals for equity and diversity of thought. How can we find platforms for that in ways that make, in civil dialogue, we don't talk about safety. I think that that's an illusion in some ways. Not everybody is safe in every dialogue, but there are spaces for us to come to have these challenging conversations.
Audience participation is one of my favorite things that happen at the event, because you never know what you're going to get, but it does show that people do form certain opinions like during the event, and it does show that the true sense of equity, like you will get the mic, you will be able to talk even though you just attended as an audience.
Interesting, right? Richard, Ted, let me invite you to ask anything of Tara, anything you heard in her presentation you're wondering about civil dialogue or about the format.
I was just thinking, just in that talk, that question and answer just now, I was thinking about equity and equality, and I was thinking how if 2 people, this is relating to what I was saying, if 2 people are unequal, say in terms of what they earn or various other outer aspects, there is always an equity within on the psycho-spiritual side, you could say. On the deeper side of the personality, there's always an equity, and equity in all the things that I was talking about, the desire for kindness and the desire for all the human attributes that we share. So it's a really interesting push and pull between equity and equality.
Right.
So just adding a different level to it, if you like.
Yes, totally.
Ted, anything you wanted to ask or add to that?
So I tend to think of things from a business point of view because of my background. And when I was introduced to the 5-chair method a couple of years ago, it was like, wow, this is like really cool, because it starts with like almost something that's pseudo entertaining, right? It's like, watch this happen. And then it invites people in to like consider like, oh, I can identify with that person, but that person too. And then their minds start to open, which is like kind of cool too. So my question to you, Tara, is at the end of an event, do people have this like little light bulbs going off and saying, I wonder what I could do next? Or do they say, okay, I've done my civic duty for the next 3 years, I'm done?
I would say there's probably both people there. I attended this event. I'm a good part of the society. I'm good for now. But then I actually collect almost like an event feedback questionnaire after each of my events. So I have that data, and I ask people to leave not only the 1 to 5 on their satisfaction, on whether or not they believe they learned, on whether or not they believe that open their mind. But then there's also like a comment box where I strongly encourage you to leave me any word. As an organizer, I would love to know what you've learned, what else should I do better, what did I do really well. So I typically, what I get is what you just said, Ted, they feel, I identify with that person, but you know what? Halfway through, I'm able to identify with the other person as well. So I think in a way, like subconsciously, people do learn this ability to be complex in thinking about an issue. Whether or not they feel it was conscious or subconscious, but I do think that the benefit is embedded within. And people that attend these events, even if they just listen and did not participate, I think they subconsciously learn that an issue is complex and your opinion can be complex too.
Yeah, that issue of complexity is critical because our soundbite media especially tries to simplify things, and it's like, it can't be simplified. It's like, if we're going to talk about race, I need 2 hours to talk to you about race.
Exactly.
Following up on Ted's question, Tara, do you sometimes get people who have a really heartfelt reaction of, oh my goodness, and a heart-opening reaction? I mean, I'm guessing that happens too.
Yes, I actually have this one letter. It was an email from an admin at my university saying, I went in, I already had an opinion about this topic. I went in, I thought I would raise my hand during the Q&A and I would state my point. But after listening to these, other chairs, that not only, it didn't change his mind, but he was like, yeah, I started kind of questioning why was I so adamant about this other chair, right? So to me, like, even though that wasn't heartfelt, I felt that it was very heartfelt to me. Like, wow, so this admin guy who was very adamant about, like the other person is wrong, emailed me independently, said, I went in with that and it didn't end up doing it because I started questioning if I was too harsh on the other part. So I thought that was one of my favorite. I actually saved it as a photo. I screenshot that email and I saved it as a photo.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think we have a question about civil dialogue that's coming in because I did want to shift to talk a little bit about Richard's ideas and the exercise, which was very, very, very interesting for me personally. And so before we shift, let's take that question from somebody in the audience who's asking, within a civil dialogue framework, how much emphasis do you put on the idea? How do you manage differing expectations and experiences of discomfort and controversy throughout the process? Tara?
Thank you for the question. I think that's very interesting. When I was first introduced to this topic, I immediately thought there's no way people can, coexist in the same room and passionately discuss about this one very controversial issue. But then the more I did it, the more I organize these and facilitate them, I realized that people, if we're honest and transparent and upfront with the rules and how it works from the beginning, it's actually a very smooth sail during the event in terms of managing people's expectations and discomfort. I start the event with, me being a host, I start with immediately like, you will feel uncomfortable. Or, I kind of set an expectation that it's a little bit wild so that there's nothing that would be of shock to the audience. And I think that the way civil dialogue facilitation was created, like to review the rules up front, to say like, these are not things we will tolerate, to be transparent and honest, I think that's the best policy in organizing and hosting and facilitating these events.
Great, thank you, Tara. So let's take this idea of honesty, right? The capacity for a human being to be honest about what their thoughts are, what they're feeling about something that is controversial. And we can shift maybe to Richard's presentation, Richard's approach, Richard, I had a couple of questions for you, but then you said something when you were speaking that I have to circle back to because I'm just too curious. You actually called civility an innate ability. And then you spoke about kindness. You spoke about the capacity for human kindness. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking about civility as innate.
So how I think of it is that as human beings, all of us innately have these tremendous abilities for empathy, compassion, kindness. They're just as innate and just as powerful as our tendencies that we may have for anger and fear and divisive tendencies, we could say. And so we have these two poles, but it's very often taught that the angry, divisive pole is stronger than the compassionate kindness pole. And from my experience and from my reading, I absolutely do not believe that. And there's increasing evidence that some of the beautiful virtues that of course people have talked about for centuries, millennia, are as innately within us as all the things that we sometimes disapprove of. So I kind of start from that premise, and I do believe that people can find those aspects within themselves simply by through various methods of turning within, and we did one exercise on that today.
So it's kind of these ways that we learn to tap into that is what I think I hear you saying. Tara, yes, you're nodding your head. Ted, you are too. Is there something you wanted to ask or add to what Richard is talking about in relationship to your own work?
So I'll chime in just a bit. The one thing that I'm like just love about this work is the hunger in people to connect. And as it turns out, once you take care of the basic Maslow hierarchy of basic needs, we really pursue happiness through our relationships and nurturing our relationships. So you can't nurture relationships if you're going to beat people up. So and then the other thing that helps people be happy is work on something bigger than yourself. So yeah, I think the work and what Richard says about that innate ability, it's there. It's sometimes dormant, but it's there, and it wants to be raised to the surface.
Well, let me just add, thank you, Ted. I just want to add to that one of the things that makes it more dormant is when we get caught in our anger or in us and them thinking, which, it happens to, I know it happens to all, it certainly happens to me, and it happens to, I think, pretty well everyone I know. There are times when we get caught in us and them anger, and as soon as we're caught in anger, then if you like, our higher brains almost turn off, and we then lose our capacity, not permanently but temporarily, to connect to the things that Ted was just talking about.
Thank you, Richard. We have a question coming in from Robert, and I saw it come up while you were speaking. I think it's a really important question to address. In your exercise where we're asking to kind of imagine, if you will, the commonalities between us and the person with whom we might find ourselves feeling very strong emotions against, what if that is... what if it's going against our values? What if it's a person who we believe is really a dangerous human being, right? So how do you reconcile that with this particular exercise?
Yeah, thanks. So examples like Hitler or Pol Pot,
yes.
or
Yep.
Idi Amin. Yes. One of the reasons why I said choose a person you know is that most of us don't know those particular kinds of people, but some of us do, because it's much easier to do that exercise with somebody that you know or can see some humanity in. But the other thing I want to say is that it is possible to totally disagree with what someone does, like Hitler or Pol Pot, for example, and still not have to suffer from anger. Because when we're caught in anger, it actually it turns off our higher brains, and all the energy gets channeled into our limbic circuits in our brains, and we then suffer because we suffer when we're angry and we suffer when we're fearful. And it's really interesting that someone like Mahatma Gandhi, for example, I mean, he had to deal with the horrors of the British Empire in India, and he was able to see those British people who behaved abysmally. He was able to see their humanity. And interestingly, because he was able to see their humanity, two things. A, it did not stop him from being politically so smart that he got the British out of their country. And B, it didn't stop him from actually doing the politics necessary to be effective, while at the same time not harboring anger. So it is possible to do those things.
So they're not mutually exclusive, so to speak. Right.
They are. You can do both at once. You can.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, you can be politically active and brilliant politically. I'm using Gandhi as an example, because getting British out of India was no mean feat. And so he was brilliant politically, and he was not angry. He did not get caught in the anger. He could actually see the humanity in the British people he spoke to. And actually it's one of the reasons why it worked so well. Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting, the whole thing is fascinating to me, you know.
Yeah. Robert, thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Well, we don't have a lot more time. So let me turn a little bit to Ted's taking us into the perfect storm, talking about these strategies. Ted, I wanted to focus specifically on the way that you're talking about technology for virtue. Could you expand a little bit upon, how obviously we see so much of the work that we do as my students who study civility at Arizona State University, they talk extensively about issues that pertain to social media platform, how it is kind of just a place where we see incivility and, growing and going in different directions. So could you talk a little bit more about how you're conceptualizing the idea of technology for virtue? What does that mean?
Sure. I believe this is true. Someone told me a story that when the telephone was first becoming popular, that people canceled their weekend evenings out for dinner in case the phone would ring, and they would just wait around for the phone to ring. And that's kind of like somewhat where we're at right now in the infancy of the information superhighway and in cell phones. So some innovative things, I would point to two examples. One would be openmindplatform.org. Suggest everybody check it out. Why is openmindplatform.org cool? It goes through 8 lessons, which is nothing new online, but it's about psychology. And it's about the stuff that Richard's talking about, of people getting to know each other and confronting your own demons and all of that stuff. It's amazing in 8 half-hour sessions. So that's a creative use of technology. Another super creative use of technology is, again, people can check this out, poll.is. Poll.is. It has some really wonderful creative things. The use of how do we get people to function as a social group online that's structured for finding agreement and moving around an issue. It's just fascinating. So that's 2 examples.
Those are, I'm thinking, folks, as we move into our next part of this panel, which is the breakout session, if you're interested in learning more about some of Ted's examples, there you go. You hop in with Ted and can find that out. We need to move into the breakout sessions to invite the attendees to meet with one of our 3 panelists. I just personally want to thank you. I was thinking about what Russ said about Ted when he introduced him. Yeah, I met Ted a couple of years ago, and clearly I've known Tara a while and have met Richard through this conference. I certainly appreciate both your passion that each of you brings to this topic, the passion to address civility in very practical ways and ways of really helping people to be better at it. But I also believe that the work that you're doing is visionary, accessible, and I look forward to inviting attendees at the conference to learn a bit more about it in the breakout session. So thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
What a panel. Thank you, Jennifer, Tara, Richard, and Ted. Incredible. It's obviously difficult to get to all of your questions, but what I think is clear is that we had the right panelists together for this session. Again, well done. Thank you. Okay, here's a chance for you to win Sharon Anderson's fresh off the press book entitled Emotional Civility. You heard me refer to it when I introduced her. Here's how you can win. You got to be quick on the draw. And I better tell you that Institute for Civil Dialogue folks are exempt from this contest. We'll find another one that you're not. The first person who correctly enters the number of chairs used in the civil dialogue exercise will be the proud owner of this brand new book. Enter it in the comment. Caroline's checking it. The first one to get the answer right gets the book. Jason Kingsley apparently is the winner. Congratulations, Jason. And you'll probably have the book before I will. So you can let me know what you think of it. I'm sure it'll be phenomenal. All of our speakers' books are going to be available. I have read many of them. I have some of them on my nightstand. And clearly, I'm going to be adding a few more before this session is over.